Welcome to MCR Op-Ed. I'm Mayank Chaya. The problem with history generally is that it is hard to feel when it is unfolding right in front of your eyes. That experience requires distance, which could be 1 hour, 1 day, 1 week, 1 month, or even 1 year. But when it is realized, it is a thrill. The nomination of Kamala Harris for President of the United States was one such experience. For the last 3.5 years as Vice President, she has already lived history as the first woman, and that too, biracial, to be that. However, the distinct possibility that she could become the first woman president of the world's most powerful democracy, both as Indian American and Black, is a league wholly of its own. She is now at the doorstep of that league. Irrespective of whether she wins on November 5th this year, in accepting her nomination, Harris gave a sanguinely self-assured speech shorn of doctrinaire bombast, but full of her well-known pragmatism.
And let me say, I know there are people of various political views watching tonight, and I want you to know, I promise to be a president for all Americans. You can always trust me to put country above party and self, to hold sacred America's fundamental principles, from the rule of law to free and fair elections to the peaceful transfer of power.
This was for the first time America was witnessing Harris as a serious, substantive, and self-assured leader who has been able to seize the moment of history that has come her way quite unexpectedly. That was in contrast to the way some of her own aides, as well as sections of the mainstream media, have treated her as someone who exuded the air of an also-ran.
And I will tell you, these fights were not easy, and neither were the elections that put me in those offices. We were underestimated at practically every turn. But we never gave up, because the future is always worth fighting for. And that's the fight we are in right now, a fight for America's future.
While projecting an unapologetic view of America as a global leader, Harris managed to strike a balance on the particularly challenging issue of the Israel-Gaza war. On the one hand, she offered a steadfast support for Israel, but on the other, spoke up for the Palestinian people equally strongly.
With respect to the war in Gaza, President Biden and I are working around the clock, because now is the time to get a hostage deal and a ceasefire deal done. And let me be clear, I will always stand up for Israel's right to defend itself, and I will always ensure Israel has the ability to defend itself, because the people of Israel must never again face the horror that a terrorist organization called Hamas caused on October 7. Including unspeakable sexual violence and the massacre of young people at a music festival. At the same time, what has happened in Gaza over the past 10 months is devastating. So many innocent lives lost. Desperate, hungry people fleeing for safety over and over again. The scale of suffering is heartbreaking. President Biden and I are working to end this war such that Israel is secure, the hostages are released, the suffering in Gaza ends, and the Palestinian people can realize their right to dignity, security, freedom, and self-determination.
While saying she will be a president for all Americans, she attacked her rival, former President Donald Trump, as an, in quote, unserious man, unquote. She pointedly detailed Trump's plans and said,
fellow Americans, this election is not only the most important of our lives, it is one of the most important in the life of our nation. In many ways, Donald Trump is an unserious man. But the consequences of putting Donald Trump back in the White House are extremely serious. Consider not only the chaos and calamity when he was in office, but also the gravity of what has happened since he lost the last election. Donald Trump tried to throw away your votes. When he failed, he sent an armed mob to the United States Capitol, where they assaulted law enforcement officers. When politicians in his own party begged him to call off the mob and send help, he did the opposite. He fanned the flames. And now, for an entirely different set of crimes, he was found guilty of fraud by a jury of everyday Americans and separately found liable for committing sexual abuse. And consider what he intends to do if we give him power again. Consider his explicit intent to set free violent extremists who assaulted those law enforcement officers at the Capitol. His explicit intent to jail journalists, political opponents, and anyone he sees as the enemy. His explicit intent to deploy our active duty military against our own citizens. Consider the power he will have, especially after the United States Supreme Court just ruled that he would be immune from criminal prosecution. Just imagine Donald Trump with no guardrails, and how he would use the immense powers of the presidency of the United States, not to improve your life, not to strengthen our national security, but to serve the only client he has ever had, himself.
She also attacked Trump on seeking an abortion ban across the country, blocking a bipartisan immigration bill, and standing by the billionaire class against the middle class. Although she did not focus specifically on her biracial identity as Indian American and Black, she spoke of her late mother, Dr. Kamala Harris, in glowing terms, casting her as her life's inspiration.
My mother had another lesson she used to teach. Never let anyone tell you who you are. You show them who you are. America, let us show each other and the world who we are and what we stand for. Freedom, opportunity, compassion, dignity, fairness, and endless possibilities. heirs to the greatest democracy in the history of the world.
The tone of the speech was one of utter confidence and vigor, that of someone profoundly aware of its historic consequence. In many ways, it was the sort of speech that sounded like it came from someone who had already won the election. She was careful in quoting all Americans with respect, even while dismissing Trump as an unserious man driven by cynicism. It was clear that she used the national limelight on her to reach out constituencies beyond the captivated Democrats. She also used the platform to emerge as a leader in her own right, with her sights firmly focused on the future as she sees it and not defined for her both by her supporters and detractors.